My husband finally admitted the thing I had been afraid of for years. He had not fallen out of love with me. He had never really chosen me at all. For a long time, I thought the story of my marriage was about a bedroom that went cold. That was the version I could say out loud. That was the version that sounded almost manageable, almost ordinary, almost like something married people whisper about after too many glasses of wine. We used to be close. Then we were not. We used to reach for each other. Then I was the only one reaching. We used to have a relationship that felt warm enough to build a life around. And then one day, without a funeral, without an announcement, without anyone standing over the body to say what had died, the intimacy was just gone. First, I tried to make it make sense. That is what you do when the person you love starts becoming strange in small ways. You do not call it rejection right away. You call it stress. You call it timing. You call it work. You call it wedding planning. You call it the apartment. You call it anything except the thing that is pressing its hands against your throat. When we first started dating, there was no question about whether he wanted me. It was obvious. It was almost embarrassing how obvious it was. We were that couple who disappeared into weekends together, living inside each other's laughter, sheets, skin, and appetite. I never wondered if he was attracted to me then. I never had to perform confidence like a trick. He wanted me. I wanted him. And for a while, that was enough evidence for me to believe everything else would follow. A year and a half into the relationship, he asked me to move in with him. Soon after that, we were engaged. It felt like momentum, but not the reckless kind. At least not to me. Felt like a door opening. A real adult door with keys and furniture and bills and the kind of conversations where you start saying we instead of I. But almost as soon as the engagement happened, our sex life stopped so suddenly it felt like someone had cut the power to the house. Not faded. Not cooled. Stopped. I asked about it, of course. I asked carefully at first, the way you ask when you are trying not to scare the answer away. He had explanations. We had moved from drafty houses into a nicer apartment, he said. Maybe before we had been cold, so we had snuggled more. Maybe that had led to sex more naturally. Maybe now that we were comfortable, the old pattern had broken. It was such a strange explanation that I almost respected how creative it was. But I wanted to believe him. I wanted so badly to be the kind of woman who trusted her fiancé, not the kind who heard an excuse and felt something inside her tilt. So I told myself he was probably right. I told myself transitions do odd things to people. I told myself love can look clumsy during change. But then I noticed other things. If I sent a flirty text, he changed the subject. If I made a suggestive joke, he dodged it. If I tried to bring us back into that easy, hungry place we used to live in, he smiled politely and stepped around me like I was furniture blocking a hallway. Still, I blamed the wedding. Weddings do strange things to people too. The money, the family expectations, the guest list, the pressure to turn one day into a perfect public performance. I thought maybe he was overwhelmed. I thought maybe once we were married, once the noise was over, he would exhale and come back to me. Then came the honeymoon. 3 weeks in the Caribbean. 3 weeks of ocean light and warm evenings and hotel sheets. 3 weeks where there was no work to blame, no errands, no apartment, no wedding planning, no ordinary life pressing in from the walls. I tried to initiate. More than once. He avoided it. We did not have sex at all. Not once. I remember the shame of that more clearly than I remember the color of the water. Because when people ask about your honeymoon, they expect you to glow. They expect sunburned cheeks, private jokes, the sweet exhaustion of being newly married. They do not expect you to smile while carrying a secret so humiliating it feels wet and heavy in your hands. When we came home, I tried one more time to make it playful. I put on lingerie. I wanted to surprise him. I wanted to be brave. I wanted to walk into the room and remind both of us that we were young, married, alive, and supposed to want each other. He came in. He saw me. And he laughed. Not a soft laugh. Not nervous. Not affectionate. He laughed. Something in me cracked so loudly I am surprised he did not hear it. I finally lost it. I told him something was obviously wrong. I told him this was too soon in a marriage for the marriage to already feel like a polite roommate arrangement with shared towels. He told me the wedding had been stressful. He said he needed to unwind. And again I tried to believe him. Because disbelief is not a door you walk through once. It is a hallway. And every few steps you find another reason to turn around. One of my friends noticed something too. She did not know the whole story. She did not know about the honeymoon or the lingerie, or the way I had begun measuring myself against his indifference. But she said something seemed different about him. She could not quite name it, only that it was not for the better. I filed that away in the private room where I kept all the things I did not want to examine, and life kept rearranging itself around the problem. He said he felt trapped in the apartment with me. A one-bedroom, he said, was too small. We had both gone from houses into this tight little space, and maybe that was the issue. That explanation sounded reasonable enough to be dangerous. So we bought a house. A whole house. More rooms. More air. More distance between the furniture and the walls. And still nothing changed. Except now houses were expensive, and because we kept our money separate, I took a second job bartending 3 nights a week. I had student loans. I did not want to be reckless. I did not want to stretch myself too thin. So I worked. And then the excuse changed. Now I was never home. That was what he said. I was never home. It did not matter how often I actually was home. It did not matter that I went out with friends less and less, quietly pruning my social life down until it barely had leaves. It did not matter that I tried to make myself available, present, easy to love. He got angrier. And the anger was confusing because it did not always walk in through the same door. Sometimes it began with the bartending shifts. Sometimes it veered into something else entirely. The subject would change in the middle of the fight. The shape of his rage would rearrange itself while I was still trying to answer the last accusation. And then he started saying things that I could not unhear. That he was not attracted to me. That if I wanted sex, I should go find it somewhere else. That he had sort of fallen into marrying me. That it had been the path we were already on, and he had felt like he could not stop it. That I had the personality of a 5-year-old. That only a child would tear up at something as simple as a puppy. There are sentences that do not end when the sound stops. They go on living in your body. They sit in the car with you. They brush their teeth beside you. They stand behind you in every mirror. The next day, if I brought up what he had said, he acted like I was exaggerating. Of course he did not mean those things. Of course he loved me. Of course he wanted to be married to me. And if I said I thought maybe he did not love me in a romantic way, he would cry. That was the worst part. The tears. Because they made me doubt myself. If he had been cold all the time, maybe leaving would have been simpler. If he had shrugged and said, yes, fine, I do not want you, maybe I could have packed a bag inside the clarity. But he cried. He looked wounded by my fear. He made me feel cruel for naming the wound he kept opening. So I stayed in the fog. I kept trying to solve a problem that changed costumes every time I got close. I told myself that people say terrible things when they are angry. But another part of me believed that anger does not invent everything. Sometimes anger is a cracked pipe. What spills out was already inside. And so I became sad in a way that frightened me. Not dramatic sad. Not movie sad. A quiet leaking sadness. I would burst into tears during the day for no clean reason. At work. In the car. In the middle of ordinary tasks. I was still in shape. I had not changed in some obvious way that explained why my husband no longer touched me. But rejection has a genius for making evidence irrelevant. You can know you are not ugly and still feel impossible to want. You can know you deserve kindness and still beg for crumbs from the person starving you. Eventually, I went to counseling. That helped. Not because my counselor gave me some magic script to fix my marriage, but because she started handing me pieces of myself back. She helped me remember that wanting intimacy in a new marriage was not unreasonable. That wanting to be kissed like a wife and not greeted like a distant cousin was not selfish. That being treated well was not an extravagant request. I started to feel stronger. And strength, when you have been shrinking for a long time, can feel almost rude. I began recording him when he yelled at me. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I needed proof. Proof that I was not inventing it. Proof that the next morning, when he looked at me with clear eyes and told me I had misunderstood, I would have something solid to hold. I collected a few recordings. Then I played them for him. In daylight. In calm. When there was no alcohol in the air and no fight happening around us. He looked genuinely shocked. He said it seemed like he had been saying things just to hurt me. He said he did not mean them. He said he did not remember saying them. He said he wanted to fix it. And for a moment, hope came back like a foolish little animal at the door. He started counseling. And then for a while I thought maybe we had found the hidden lever. Maybe alcohol had been the monster behind the curtain. Maybe the man who said those things was not the man I married, but some warped version of him that only appeared after drinking. He took me out on a kind of super date. Nothing fancy. Just a night built from things I loved. It was fun. Really fun. That is another part people do not always understand. Bad relationships are not bad every second. If they were, almost nobody would stay. There are good days. There are inside jokes. There are dinners where you laugh so hard your cheeks ache. There are walks and errands and shared shows and the soft comfort of knowing someone's habits. That night I remember thinking, there you are. There we are. Maybe we are not dead yet. Then in a bar while we were still smiling, his face changed. Not slowly. Not like a mood settling over him. It was as if a switch flipped behind his eyes. He snapped at me. The air tightened. I insisted we go home. And at home the yelling started again. The next day I told him I thought we needed a divorce. He begged for couples counseling instead. But by then I could feel the difference between a shared problem and a problem he kept handing me to carry. I told him he needed to figure out what was happening inside him before I could even consider counseling together. I left for a few hours and went to the bar where I worked, not for a shift, just because I needed somewhere to be that was not the house. I told someone I did not know very well what was happening. She suggested he might have an adverse reaction to alcohol. When I came home, he had arrived at the same theory. He said he thought alcohol was changing him. He said he should not drink anymore. I did not really believe he would stop. But he did. Cold turkey. And the yelling stopped with it. He became cheerful. Kind. Almost euphoric about not drinking. He was proud of himself and part of me was proud of him too. I did not want to diminish that. I did not want to become the person who said yes, but when someone was trying to recover. So I waited. I gave the improvement room. But the bedroom stayed cold. Not just sex. Kissing too. If I leaned in, he would pull back so it became a peck. He said he did not really like kissing. He said he did not understand the appeal. Imagine being married to someone who can sit beside you on the couch and laugh with you, who can grocery shop with you, who can share a house and holidays and errands and practical affection, but who treats your desire like an awkward object you keep dropping in the room. I asked about couples counseling again. He said he did not think we needed it because he was doing so much better now that he had stopped drinking. And I did not know what to do with that. Because yes, he was better. But better than cruelty is not the same as good. Better than yelling is not the same as love. A quiet house can still be empty. I was afraid of pushing too hard. Afraid of damaging his recovery. Afraid that if I demanded more, I would become responsible if he drank again. But underneath that noble-sounding fear was another fear. I was afraid to face the answer. I wrote everything out because I had reached the end of my own thoughts. I asked strangers what they saw. And strangers, with all their blunt little lanterns, saw what I was trying not to see. They told me this was not just a libido problem. They told me he needed medical testing, hormones, a doctor, a psychiatrist, couples counseling. They told me I had not taken vows of celibacy. They told me that if he cared about the marriage, he had to participate in fixing it. So I made an ultimatum. Not a dramatic one. Not the kind thrown across a room. A quiet line in the dirt. He needed to get medical testing. He needed to see someone psychologically. Then we needed couples counseling. And I decided something important before I said it. He had to do the legwork. I had done so much already. I had carried the conversations, the emotional labor, the hope, the analysis, the tears, the recording, the explaining, the shrinking, the trying. If he wanted the marriage, he could make the appointments. He took it surprisingly well. There were tears on both sides. He agreed. Yes, he said. He would do these things for us. And then days passed. Then a week. Then more. When I brought it up, we had a small fight. He said he needed to do things on his own time. A few more weeks passed. And something inside me became very still. Not peaceful. Not healed. Just still. Because I understood. He did not care enough to do anything. Not even when the marriage was standing in front of him with a pulse so weak you could barely find it. I went to a friend's house to clear my head. To talk. To make a plan. Not a fantasy plan. A divorce plan. The kind of plan that makes your hands feel unfamiliar. I was ready, finally, to stop living inside the maybe. And then life, with its terrible timing, threw a boulder through the door. A few minutes before I got home, he got a phone call. His sister was in a coma. She was dying. I booked his ticket so he could go see her. She died a few hours after he got there. Everything in me that had been preparing to leave folded itself up and went silent. Because grief had entered the house. Real grief. Not metaphor. Not marital disappointment. Death. And his sister left behind 2 teenage daughters. Girls standing at the edge of adulthood with their mother suddenly gone. Girls who needed people. Girls who needed steadiness. Girls who did not need their aunt by marriage announcing divorce while their world was already burning. So I pushed my pain down. I became useful. I became present. I became the best aunt I could be. I sent care packages. I remembered things. I tried to show up in ways that said, without making a speech of it, you are not alone. I got a dog too. That dog may have saved more of me than anyone knew. A small living creature can pull you through a day by needing breakfast, by needing a walk, by pressing its warm body near yours when the house feels emotionally abandoned. For a while my husband and I seemed closer. At least that is what I told myself. We were doing something meaningful together, or so I thought. We had a shared purpose. The girls. The family. The grief. The practical machinery of care. And because the crisis was bigger than my marriage, I used it as a blanket to cover the old cold place. But slowly I noticed something. Most of what we did for the girls came from me. Not him. I initiated it. I remembered. I planned. I cared in the active, inconvenient way care requires. He seemed annoyed by it. Annoyed when I made a big deal over surprise care packages their school suggested. Annoyed when I wanted to do the small ceremonial things that tell a grieving young person, your milestones still matter. On the youngest niece's graduation day, I asked if he thought other parents would bring flowers. I wondered if we should bring some too. That was all. Flowers. A simple question. He lost it. He yelled that I cared too much about these things. Then somehow the fight traveled all the way to crackers. Crackers I bought when company came over for dinner. That was the thing about his anger. It could start at flowers and arrive at crackers, like the route had always made perfect sense to him. But this time, instead of drowning in the confusion, I saw him differently. I saw the eye rolls when I talked, the little cuts at my intelligence, the way he tolerated my kindness as if it were a character flaw, the way there was still no sex, no hunger, no real physical affection, only a life that worked if I agreed not to need certain things. So I started talking to people again. Friends. A therapist. I began building another plan. A calmer one. Cleaner one. I did not want to ambush him. I did not want to scream. I wanted to say, this is how I see our marriage, and then hear how he saw it. Maybe it would end in divorce. Probably, if I was honest. But I did not force myself to call it definite yet. I had a work trip, and I used the time away to gather myself. I went on a long hike. I am not especially religious, but I prayed the whole time. Not beautifully. Not with perfect words. More like breathing with bruised ribs. Please let me see clearly. Please let me be strong. Please let the truth come out, whatever it is. When I came home, my friends and I rehearsed the possible outcomes. Fee cried. Fee begged. Fee promised to change. Fee got angry. Where I would go. What I would say. How I would keep steady. I prepared for a storm. I prepared for tears. I prepared for bargaining. I did not prepare for the door simply opening. I sat down with him as calmly as I could. I explained how I saw our marriage. I said I thought we had different ideas of what a relationship should be, different needs, different definitions of partnership. I asked for his feedback, and he agreed with me, just like that. No fight, no denial, no attempt to reach for me across the table. He said everything felt forced. He said our relationship was not natural to him. He said he had married me because that was the path he was already on. He said since he had not planned on having children, it was not like it mattered all that much. And then, as if he were describing a preference for black coffee or quiet mornings, he said he generally preferred being alone. There are moments when your mind refuses to understand language in the order it arrives. You hear the words. You know what each one means. But together they become too large to enter. Forced. Not natural. The path he was on did not matter all that much. Preferred being alone. I thought of the honeymoon, the lingerie, the laughter, the nights I cried, the recordings, the counseling, the way I had tried to become easier, smaller, prettier, calmer, less needy, more patient, the way I had defended him to myself, the way I had held back from leaving because his sister died, the way I had poured love into his nieces because love needed somewhere to go. And all that time he had known. Maybe not in the dramatic way people know in movies, maybe not with the villain's clarity, but somewhere inside him, he had known enough to withhold the truth and keep the life. He asked if I thought we should get couples counseling. It was almost absurd. Like a man standing beside a demolished house asking whether we should repaint the kitchen. I told him calmly that after what he had just said, I did not think counseling was an option. And then he moved straight into logistics. Who gets what? Next steps. The house. The money. He said he could probably technically fight for alimony, but he would not. Then he mentioned the dog. He said he would not fight for my dog if I did not go after his separate finances. That sentence hurt in a different way. Not romantic. Not sexual. Not even marital. It was cold. Practical. Transactional. The dog, the one bright breathing comfort I had brought into the house while trying not to disappear, was suddenly a bargaining chip. My husband had just told me our marriage had been forced, that choosing me had been more like failing to step off a conveyor belt than falling in love, and within minutes he was discussing assets. I had imagined many endings. I had imagined him crying. I had imagined him saying he did love me, that he was broken, that he was afraid, that he wanted to try. I had imagined anger too. A slammed door. A cruel sentence. A last eruption. But I had not imagined this smooth, administrative surrender. The most painful thing was not that he let me go. It was that he seemed relieved to have the paperwork begin. I told him I would give him space that night. Then I drove to my friend's house and cried until my body felt hollow. It is a strange mercy when someone does not fight a divorce. It makes the path easier. But it also confirms the thing you were praying was not true. I had spent years wondering whether I was misreading him. Whether I was too sensitive, too needy, too focused on sex, too unwilling to appreciate the good parts. And now the answer was sitting in front of me, plain and brutal. He had not wanted a marriage the way I wanted a marriage. He had not loved me the way I loved him. Maybe he cared for me in some limited way. Maybe he liked my company. Maybe I had been familiar, convenient, part of a life that asked little of him as long as I did the emotional lifting. But he had not chosen me with his whole heart. And my body had known it before my mind could bear it. That is the part that hurts. The gut knows. It whispers. Then it knocks. Then it bangs its fists against the walls. And sometimes we call that noise anxiety because anxiety is easier to dismiss than truth. I should have listened. I am sitting in a coffee shop now trying to write my way into the next life. My eyes feel swollen. My hands feel too light. I do not know what the next step is. Maybe I will drive to my brother's. Maybe I will find a storage unit. Maybe I will move into the guest room until the lawyer tells me what to do. The future is suddenly huge and sharp-edged. But it is mine. That matters. Even through the fear, that matters. I keep thinking about the version of myself who stood in that lingerie and watched him laugh. I want to go back to her. Not to change the past. I know I cannot do that. But I want to stand between her and the shame. I want to tell her that his laughter is not a verdict. It is evidence. I want to tell the woman on the honeymoon that desire is not something she should have to chase across 3 weeks of ocean and sun. I want to tell the woman recording fights on her phone that needing proof does not mean she is crazy. It means someone has been stealing certainty from her. I want to tell the woman who stayed after the sister died that compassion is beautiful, but it should not become a prison. I want to tell her that being good to grieving girls was not a mistake. Not at all. That part was love. Real love. The kind that shows up with care packages and graduation questions and flowers. The kind that notices the small things because small things are where abandoned people learn whether they still matter. I do not regret loving those girls. I only grieve that I had to learn again and again that my husband could stand near tenderness and still not understand it. I am afraid of losing them. That is one of the parts one feels sickest about. I know divorce can make family lines redraw themselves in ugly ink. I know people take sides. I know teenagers who have already lost too much might not know what to do with an aunt who is no longer attached by marriage. But I hope they know. I hope they know my care was not rented from his last name. I hope they know my door does not close just because the legal tie breaks. I hope someday when the dust settles they remember that I tried. And I hope they can forgive whatever distance comes next. I am trying not to call the whole marriage a waste. That word is too clean for something so tangled. There were real days inside it. Real jokes. Real meals. Real errands. Real grief. Real effort. And some of the effort was mine in ways I can be proud of. But I also know this. I do not want to wake up at 85 years old and realize my life never really started because I was waiting for someone else to finally want me. I do not want to spend decades becoming fluent in excuses. I do not want a marriage where the best defense is that he is not yelling anymore. I do not want affection that has to be negotiated like a contract. I do not want a kiss that arrives only when I lower my expectations to the floor. I want a life where love does not make me feel foolish for needing it. And I am beginning to understand that this is not too much. It is not too much to want to be touched. It is not too much to want to be chosen. It is not too much to want someone who looks at your tenderness and does not sneer. Someone who sees you tear up over a puppy and thinks there she is, not what is wrong with her. I have spent years turning pain into discipline. I lifted weights. I worked. I held myself together. I channeled frustration into something I could measure. One more rep. One more mile. One more shift. One more day without falling apart in public. And maybe that will help me now. Maybe healing is not one grand transformation. Maybe it is one small act repeated until the body believes survival is not temporary. Call the lawyer. Pack a bag. Find the paperwork. Walk the dog. Eat something. Drink water. Answer one message. Cry in the car. Then get out of the car. There is no graceful way to have your life split open. People talk about new beginnings like they arrive clean, wrapped in sunlight, smelling faintly of fresh paint. Mine feels more like standing in the wreckage with a broom I do not remember buying. But there is air here. That is what I notice. There is air. For years, I lived in a house where the silence beside me was louder than shouting. Now the silence is different. Still frightening. Still lonely. But not dishonest. And maybe that is the first mercy. A lonely truth is kinder than a crowded lie. I do not know who I will be after this. I do not know what love will look like when I am ready to risk it again. I do not know how long it will take before I can hear certain words without flinching. But I know the direction. Away from begging. Away from shrinking. Away from waiting outside a locked room with my own name on the door. Toward myself. Toward the life I almost postponed forever. Toward a future big enough to scare me because it is finally open. After I finish crying, I will take one step. Then another. Not because I am fearless. Because I am done mistaking endurance for love.